conservatives in the Capitol is Thaddeus McCotter, whose book I've been looking at, whose outstanding book, Seize Freedom, I've been looking at. You must get it. He talks about us being engaged in the war for freedom. He does it in his own wise way, with his own sense of wit. He talks about the dangers of moral relativism. I can spend a whole week talking to you about this man's book, which belongs on the shelf. If you've got Breitbart's book and Ann Coulter's book, you've got no reason to not have McCotter's book. Plus, if you have McCotter's book, you should prominently display it because it will annoy any liberals who visit you. And we are very welcome to have here on the broadcast today Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan. Hello, Congressman. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. But for the accuracy of the record, I'm a John Lennon guy.
You're a John Lennon guy. Oh, and who of us don't remember where we were on that night?
I still remember it distinctly.
Where were you?
I was home in bed. I was in junior high school. I was in high school as a sophomore. And I was sneaking on the headphones listening to the radio at night, and my dad came in and told me he saw it on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I remember where I was. I was living a few blocks away from there, and I remember very well the police cars and all that happening. And where I'm speaking to you from now is about 1,000 feet from where the other Beatle died of cancer here in Los Angeles.
Where George passed away.
I don't want to give away my exact location, yes, but I'm about 1,000 feet from the exact secret spot.
Yeah, and it was, with Lennon, it was, especially being young, it was kind of eye-opening about how someone who did nothing but create could be targeted for destruction.
You're a fascinating man, Congressman McCotter, and you're welcome on this show anytime to talk about anything you want to talk about. I've been following you very closely, and you've got this book out there. You're interested in so many things. I mean, we could take time, wasting time talking about bin Laden, which everyone else is talking about, but you've taken on also issues like moral relativism as an important thing, and I'm fascinated by that because I have a feeling we're cut from the same cloth. What would you like to tell us about that?
Oh, the question that I posited was, can a nation built upon self-evident truths survive moral relativism, which really leads away from reason and the moral imagination into will and appetite. And so when we look at it, we have a dichotomy of thought in the country, philosophy diverging from ideology. And what the reality is that in the country, we recognize from the inception that we had our rights from a higher source than government. But when you start to break down universal truths and principles as exposed to us and revealed to us through our human history, the patrimony we get standing on the shoulders of giants, as Burke put it, the eternal contract of society, what happens is you wind up where a simple majority can determine at any given time what they believe to be right or wrong, if they even use those terms, or what they, quote, value, which is really applied to commodities, not to truths. So when you have that kind of fundamental split in thinking in the country, it leads to much of the chaos that we see today.
Do you notice that that's even applicable as we dissect all the events surrounding the finding and the killing of Osama bin Laden, that merely in the fact that Bush techniques and policies were the ones used that led us to this, and yet they're still denigrated by the left? This is the therapeutic moment in which they find themselves.
Well, yes, but ironically, the left, which likes to talk about values and be morally relative when it suits them, is now arguing whether or not something is right or wrong, which I think in its own ironic way is progress. I guess that's doubly ironic to use that term, progress, with them. But when we think about it, I was derided at the time for saying that in many ways, and I told President Bush this too, 43, I said that I bet that historically you'll be remembered as a Republican version of Harry Truman, a man who was derided on his way out of office. They said he was inarticulate. They had the phrase to err is Truman. And yet over time, the wisdom of the policies he laid in place helps to lead to the victory over the Soviets in the Cold War. And that in the war for freedom against terrorism, that the Bush administration was going to lay many policies in place that other administrations would pick up. And again, in an irony, we've seen where President Obama, as Senator Obama, derided a lot of those policies, and yet once entrusted with the Oval Office, has realized that he had to follow them to be successful.
Congressman, were you as struck as I am when Senator Clinton became the Secretary of State and she was going to make her first visit to China soon after Obama's inauguration? She mentioned that human rights were no longer a part of a topic of conversation between China and the United States, that it was really the economy dominated everything from here forward. Were you appalled to see this shifting sand for the first time in your and my life, that human rights were no longer of great interest to this administration?
Absolutely, and unfortunately the roots of this stem back further than simply the Obama administration. I remember when I had my differences of opinion with the Bush administration for attending the Beijing Olympics, or when Secretary of State Rice at the time said it was our job to usher the People's Republic of China onto the world stage. As a Reaganite, I said, well, when you deal with a nuclear-armed communist dictatorship, your job is to usher them into the ash can of history. So we've seen this go through both administrations, and this is what I think so many people in America get frustrated by, is that the threat of communist China, both as a mercantilist economic force and as a potential rival, as their own military points out, to United States strategic interests. What we start to see is anybody who wants to look for an alternative to the current policies that are being approached to them are not going to find it in either the leadership of either party. And this is one of the things people find very, very frustrating.
Yes, I was absolutely appalled. I was filling in for Fred Thompson on his radio show that day when Bush had attended the opening of the Olympics. And it was truly just, first off, the Olympics themselves, the opening ceremony was disturbing, if you asked me, because you knew if someone made a wrong move, they'd be shot later.
It's like it should have been filmed by Leni Riefenstahl.
It was absolutely true. And the fact that our president was there made a terrible statement to the world, especially when we know about, you and I presume you're a Catholic as I am.
Yes.
We cannot worship in China if we went there. Yeah, where would we go to church on Sunday?
A nation that has a state administration for religious affairs that forces the Catholic Church to have an unofficial Catholic Church because the government wants to run everything. A country that does not have free and independent labor unions. A country that engages in any act of violence it wants against bloggers for expressing their God-given right to free speech, the free exercise of religion, the freedom of association. This is a country that's founded upon, right now, at the present time, an ideology antithetical to the philosophy of the United States. We in the United States know that our right to liberty is what has created government and what is our foundation for prosperity and for security. Unfortunately, the Politburo over in the People's Republic of Communist China still believes that liberty is a threat to state-provided prosperity and security.
Well, this is the China that Obama would like to be running, apparently. I know we've only got you for a few more moments. I'll ask you one last question, and that is this. Are you as struck as I am? I'm an outsider. I'm a Hollywood guy sitting in Los Angeles. I make motion pictures most of the time. Are you as struck as I am by how effectively the left almost always seizes the debate and frames the debate, and how we're always playing catch-up on our side?
Well, Republicans tend to be avocational politicians, which is good, it's healthy, but they also tend to be numbers people. And this is one of the things that I find so frustrating now. As we've talked about communist China, we've talked about foreign affairs, we've talked about moral relativism, and yet all you hear out of many in the Republican Party today is that if we balance the budget, the world will be perfect. The reality is a balanced budget is a means to an end. It's a means to perpetuating American exceptionalism. It's a means to showing what a free people can achieve. But it wasn't a balanced budget amendment that committed the terrorist acts of September 11th. It's not a balanced budget amendment that is going to make sure that our children grow up to be virtuous citizens in a free republic. It's simply a means to an end, a necessary one, and it's also a measurement of our liberty at the time. But it's not going to be the sole end, and what the left understands, because they attack it all the time, are the roots of American exceptionalism, because they want to fundamentally change the country. So for Republicans, as we've heard, to call for truces on social issues, or to not talk about foreign affairs, or think that bin Laden's being brought to justice has somehow ended the threat to the United States is, again, what I find many in my own party find very frustrating, and people throughout the country find frustrating.
Well, Congressman McCotter, if I may, just one more question here. With the president going tomorrow to the place where the chickens came home to roost, I find that the left seem to be at an existential moment where they don't seem to want to even define America's place in the world. And I ask the question, do they even like America at this point?
Well, I think they've always been set out to change it, that they find it a fundamentally flawed country, whereas people who are more conservative or more traditionalists find it to be a fundamentally decent country and know that we have to do what Burke told us was the disposition of a statesman. It is to conserve and improve. The left, coming out of the cesspool of Rousseau's ideology, wants to radically change it and have a bunch of Ivy Leaguers with academic blackboards tell us how to live our lives. I disagree with that.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Thaddeus McCotter, truly one of the great congressmen. If they were all like you, Sarah, we would be in so much better shape. I thank you for taking the time to join us. I know you've got a scoot, but you're welcome here anytime to talk about anything you care to, Sarah. And your book, of course, Seize Freedom, everyone should get and keep on their desk to annoy liberals. Thank you, sir, for joining.